Tuesday morning OGP. I should not be solo. I don't think. I'm trying to anticipate. We'll find out for sure if Andrew Makowitz joins us here. Losing my rhythm without my co-host by my side. We're going to talk about news and notes around the New York Football Giants, some conversations around Kadarius Tony, certainly, but ultimately, this is going to be a Daniel Jones-based discussion as we remain positive off the Week 1 win, but also think about where Daniel Jones is in his development, where he's stacked up relative to some other QBs around the league, and how we continue to grow on that, all coming up once I get my act together after the theme music. Yes, friends. It's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, on a Tuesday morning. As we say, I am Adam Armbrecht, also covering the Brooklyn Nets over on the Locked On Nets podcast with my boy Doug Norrie, waiting for the healthy, wealthy, and wise Mr. Andrew Makowitz, who will be in. Listen, guy's got a life to lead. I cannot relate to having a kid. That's usually a factor in some of these morning sessions. Thank you for joining us over on YouTube on the live stream as everybody starts to get in the room. Top of the show, intro, not strong, not my strongest performance. When we talk about getting the act together for the next phase of this week. We still are buzzing from the 21-20 victory over the Tennessee Titans on Sunday, coming off of the Monday Night Football action, which actually will inform some of what we're going to discuss here along the way. You have Russell Wilson in his new home with the Denver Broncos, going back to his old home with the Seattle Seahawks, right? Little note around the head coach, Pete Carroll, 70 years old, right there with Bill Belichick. And I think that makes them the fourth and fifth oldest head coaches in NFL history. A couple other guys mentioned in there. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of their seasons play out for both of them. Obviously, a great win for the Seattle Seahawks. Little bit of help from the rookie head coach over there on the Broncos side of things. But getting a win like that matters if you're Seattle. Is it all over? Is a full-blown rebuild. You got Geno Smith under center, and they come out and they get this big win, and a good time that we can welcome in the co-host here of the One Giant Podcast. And that is, as you know, Mr. Andrew Makowitz. I said at the top that you were going to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. We know that you are, good sir, but official. A welcome into the show.
Thank you. Actually, Adam, I'm a little under the weather today, not feeling good. Woke up with a little bit of a fever, so I'm playing through it, but it's important because it's week 1 and the Giants got the W on Sunday.
But I'm not going to lie to you. I very specifically said it and said it multiple times at the top of the show here waiting for you that you were going to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. Probably something incidental. It was probably, Rory, a lot of things going on in the household. So just don't do this. Don't put egg on my face because of your tardiness. It's a problem.
Well, I apologize, but let's get into it. What were we talking about, Adam?
Yes. I was just a little bit of we were talking about the Monday Night Football, obviously. I mean, this is going to tie into the theme of this show. I want to update and have a conversation around Kadarius Tony and what Brian Daboll said regarding his usage. We're going to all 22 film. Finally got my hands into that yesterday. So I think tomorrow's show we'll dive in a little bit. Want to look at that last drive, the game-winning drive for the Giants, what worked well, where are some things that I think the Giants can improve, etc. So look forward to that tomorrow. But the big one's going to be this conversation around Daniel Jones. We had a comment coming out of our post-game podcast that I got to sink my teeth into here, man. But were you surprised last night? Did you watch the game, fever and all? Were you surprised by, I'm going to say, the Denver side of it? I mean, really it comes down to a couple of miserable fumbles going out on the goal line from that being a win. But it kind of falls underneath the umbrella of, man, the first week in the NFL, you can't fully gauge where things are because a lot of really good teams looked bad or really bad coming out of week 1.
Yeah, I mean, 2 fumbles within the 5-yard line for the Broncos. Obviously, if they convert those, we're talking about a 2-score win, double-digit win for the Broncos. And instead, crazy things happen week 1. And then you have the play calling at the end of the game by Nathaniel Hackett, where it's like, they're kind of at midfield and they have a minute.
What's the problem?
It's like attempting the second longest field goal in the history of the NFL. And, Brandon McManus has said, I told them I was good from 46. They got to the 46-yard line. That was it. But it's like, no, that's not really all the story. Like, you just paid Russell Wilson $200 million. It's 4th and 5. You have to trust your multi-$50 million a year quarterback to make a play on fourth down to get you in a better chance to win. It felt like getting 10 or 15 more yards and then kicking a field goal, even if it was a fourth down, had a better chance than in Seattle making a 64-yard field goal.
And at a minimum, call the timeout when you have a minute plus ish on the clock and take your time figuring out what you want to do. A big part of that felt like it was, what are we thinking here? Are we gonna go for it on fourth down? We're not gonna go for it on fourth down. Well, 10 seconds went off. What are we thinking here, coach? Give me another 7 seconds here. And then at that point, while it may ultimately have been the decision to kick the field goal on fourth down, and you can, again, if it goes through, you question it still a little bit, but you say, hey, got away with one there. But once enough time runs off, then you are in that position because you go, well, if we go for it on fourth down, even if we get it, we've only got 20 seconds. All those wheels and bells and whistles, I think, are going off at that point. So a little footnote of ineptitude.
The sad thing I was going to say is a lot of new coaches made different decisions for good and for bad. It's interesting. You look at someone like Dan Campbell of the Lions, down 10 points in the third quarter, trying onside kicks. It's like, no, we don't need to do that. Let's go play some defense and figure it out. You have you have Nathaniel Hackett, setting up and wasting a minute so that he could kick a 64-yard field goal. But then you also have our head coach, Brian Daboll, deciding, he looked at his players, just like, we're going to go for two. And they were like, hell yes, we're going to go for two. And it felt like that was one of the actual wins in terms of gutsy moves that someone decided to make this weekend.
Right, and that's the contrast here. Quick shout out to Marty, welcome into the show, man. Frequent flyer. Michael as well got in on one of the YouTube live streams. I think Michael R has been trying to catch us when we're doing these in real time. And then Charlie, man, we appreciate the kind words. Of course, we try to bring the insights, brother. That's what we're all about here on OGP. But yeah, I think that's what happens, right? Brian Daboll doesn't get it. I think we look at it individually from a Giants perspective and where they are. Hey, gutsy play. We still feel good about it. But around the league, results oriented, right? If it works, then you look at it a certain way. If it doesn't, you reflect on it a little bit longer. The thing that I want to get here too, though, because you mentioned the Giants. Brian Daboll, as my wire gets in my way here. So here's what happened. And we said we were going to start to bring a little bit more perspective coming out of that game. The Giants won. That was the most important piece. I already have a little bit of I want to, rein in the horses here for all the Giants fans out there, because I think we're already getting a little over our skis, looking at the upcoming schedule. We know that Dak Prescott got injured. We'll touch on that here a little bit later in the show. However, so coming out of it, somebody said, and rightfully so, that it was Adam just hates Daniel Jones. And he posted up the ratings for QBs coming out of Sunday. And Daniel Jones was the fourth highest rated QB. Not QBR, but fourth highest rated QB. And let me clarify. Don't hate Daniel Jones. Want Daniel Jones to be successful, but I'm also going to be critical of him. I'm going to try to judge him based on what I see. So here's where it became very interesting. And, Andy, where it became very exciting for me following the game last night, because Geno Smith gave a performance that really folded into the narrative that I thought was a legitimate one that I could build off of, but I needed to make sure that the sample size was going to be strong enough. And so go on this journey with me, if you will, Andy, and I'll take brief pauses in there for you to supply some context and insights of your own. On Sunday, all the way through the week one. So we add in, obviously, last night's game and Sunday night's game. Highest rated quarterbacks went like this: Mahomes, Herbert. You also had Kirk Cousins in there. You had Daniel Jones was fourth, Josh Allen, Jameis Winston, Tannehill, and Tua. And that's the top 9. I don't know why I went with 9. It really doesn't matter. I'm not leaving anything out here by doing that. There's another player inside of this list that we'll touch on in a second. What was interesting was when you looked at all of these stat lines, Daniel Jones threw the second fewest pass attempts out of all the starters in the NFL in week one, 21 pass attempts. When you talk about guys like Patrick Mahomes, 360 yards, 5 up, no down. 279 for Herbert, 3 up, no down. Kirk Cousins, 277, 2 up, no down. Josh Allen had a wacky game for himself, right? Still 3 up, 2 down, 297. 269 for Winston. Even guys like Tannehill, and then we mentioned Tua, Tannehill in the loss, 266, 2 up, no down. And 270 with 2 up and 1 pick for Tua. Daniel Jones, as everybody knows, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 188 yards. The other guy on this list who ended up finishing with the third highest rating in week one was Monday night's Geno Smith. And he threw 195 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Brief pause there to align this idea of it's not that Daniel Jones had a bad week one, but he's right there on par with what Geno Smith accomplished. And I actually think there's a real correlation there. Geno Smith is 31 years old, but expectations for what a player is capable of, Daniel Jones has a much higher ceiling than Geno Smith. But I think that's what Seattle wanted Geno Smith to do, right? Manage the game here, do some things really well early, and then avoid mistakes late. Likewise for the Giants. We want Saquon Barkley to be Saquon Barkley of his rookie campaign, and we want Daniel Jones to stay out of the way. Is that a good baseline before I even further this discussion?
Well, you're clearly showing your bias, and the listeners are right. They've picked up on it for years. You clearly will find any stat. You talk about him being top 10, and you talk about the Josh Allens, the Patrick Mahomes of the world, and the only comparison you have directly is to Geno Smith, who also won his game, by the way.
And by the way, that's important, right? Inside of this list, Mahomes, Herbert, Smith, Cousins, Jones, Allen, Winston, and Tua, outside of Tannehill, who the Giants played, all of those players won their games, and that cannot be overlooked when you're having these discussions. 100%.
If put it this way, if Daniel Jones completes 80% of his passes and has a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, Daniel Jones will be back with the Giants next season. Like that is what, like if he
but Andrew, okay, so let's keep going down this road a little bit further. The first thing, let's have a little bit of fun here too. Would you sign up for Daniel Jones throwing 34 touchdowns and 17 interceptions this season?
Yes.
Right, you probably would, right? Because 34 touchdowns is amazing. Would you sign up for 17 fumbles, understanding that he got blindsided? That's probably the one area you want to avoid, right? Now, here's the deal. And the reason why I want to further this discussion, the other big factor inside of this that I think is important is the key things that matter most, right? Critical decision making and when the plays need to be made by your quarterback. One of those being third down completion percentage. Inside of all those quarterbacks that I listed on here, 56% for a guy like Patrick Mahomes. You've got everything in the spectrum, 33% for Daniel Jones. That's where he's slotted in. He ends up being, out of this list, only above one other quarterback out of week one, and that was Geno Smith, who completed 32% of his third down completions. Tua, Tannehill, almost 40%. Jameis Winston, 35%. A guy like Josh Allen, even with the interceptions, still completed 48% of his third down completion. So that's the first layer of context to what this game looks like. And by the way, as I said coming into the season, I'm giving it full 3 weeks. You played the Tennessee Titans. They are a good defense. You can make the case when you look at all these quarterbacks, that was one of the more difficult defensive matchups for a quarterback to go against. But here's the big one, my friend. As you said, if Daniel Jones is doing that, he'll be back next year. Will he? Will he be back next year if when you go further inside the numbers and we talk about the most important metric that quarterbacks get judged on now, which is QBR, which takes into game situations and context, where do you think Daniel Jones is in the spectrum of these 9 quarterbacks that we're talking about, 8 of which won their week 1 games? Where does he land on the QBR spectrum?
I don't know. Is he, you said out of 10, is he 9th out of the 9 quarterbacks? Like what are we looking at?
Yeah, he's 9th, buddy, but I'm not talking about 9th by a small margin. Going top of the list down in order of their rating and then to their QBR. This is Mahomes, Herbert, Smith, Cousins. Jones will be 5th listed here as we run through these. And then Allen, Winston, Tannehill, and Tua. 94.1, 84.8, 69.1. That's Geno Smith. 80.7, 25.8. That's Daniel Jones. 91.2, 53.3, 65.3 for Tannehill, who lost in that game, and 78.2 for Tua. So my point here is that I'm not disgusted by what Daniel Jones did. But let's look at it. And that's why I bring in this Geno Smith comparison. This is the goal here. The goal is for Daniel Jones to be a guy that's slow and steady over the course of the season. You're going to expand it. You're going to want him to look good. You're going to want him to hit some of those bomb plays like he did. But the beginning of this process is be the game manager. Don't make any egregious errors, which he did in that game, and try to guide ourselves to getting wins. But when you see a QBR like that, it contextualizes what really went on in that game. He made a couple of really nice plays. And yes, taking everything into account, we understand you're missing some of the weapons, and we understand the offensive line was not perfect, right? So this isn't just a Daniel Jones discussion. But it's not perfect for any of these quarterbacks on this list. And if you want to start to be in that conversation around what we want from Daniel Jones over the next 2 weeks, in that 3-week sample size, I'm going to need to see that QBR get better. I'm going to need to see the critical point decision-making from Daniel Jones improve. It's why Brian Dable went over and got in his grill a little bit after the pick. And it's why we think Daniel Jones responded well on that great game-winning drive, navigating it, albeit 12 plays, 9 of which were runs to Saquon Barkley.
So, Adam, the way that you're describing all this makes it seem like the Giants lost the game, right? The way that you're talking about Daniel Jones is
No, I'm
like the
not. I'm
Giants
not.
didn't
No, I'm
win.
not.
He's not
No,
the guy. We've officially written him off because that's
that's
the
not what I'm
sentiment that
saying.
you're giving.
No, it's not. That's not what I'm saying. The sentiment that I'm giving is when someone comes, when fans want to say we come off this win. I love the win. I'm excited about the win. We're all excited about Saquon Barkley, and we're excited about what this coaching staff accomplished. But what I'm saying is it was a win, and now we can talk about the upcoming, just the fact that we have Carolina coming up, and then we also are favored in that game by 2.5 points right now on the road, and then we also have Dallas, which is a big opportunity. But what I'm saying is you need to contextualize a win and then the individual performances that are occurring. And in this moment, if you said we just played one game, you want to keep or cut Daniel Jones going into next year, I would say, well, I can't keep him. I want to say incomplete, and I want more games. But Daniel Jones showed you some good things that he can build on. Like that's all that I'm saying. The idea you come out of this game and you go, look at his rating. He was 115, fourth highest rating coming out of week 1. The QBR is what tells you the story of him. And that QBR, by the way, I'm pretty sure if we run down that laundry list of where that QBR stacked up, his 25.8 put him 27th in the league behind a bad game for Derek Carr, just ahead of a bad game for Matthew Stafford. And you can take those things. A 16 for Aaron Rodgers in week 1. So none of this is a referendum on what Daniel Jones is flattened, period, but it's contextualizing what that game looked like and understanding. If he gets that touchdown in the red zone there, all of a sudden the Giants can have a game going away here, right? Things could have gone a lot differently, and he would get more of the responsibility, more of the credit for helping to guide this team. That's all. That's all that this is. I'm trying to keep the Giants fans grounded after a great win.
But you're missing, so you contextualize it like, oh, look at his yards, look at his QBR. It's more similar to Geno Smith. But when you go into the numbers, the reason why he had such a good pass rating was, one, he completed the balls that he is supposed to, which is half the battle with Daniel Jones, making sure that he is accurate. The second piece, Adam, is behind Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. Daniel Jones was third in yards per attempt. That meant that the new scheme and the new offense
threw 21 passes.
Right, but even still, he's still almost 9 yards per attempt, which is an elite level at the NFL. So what I'm saying is,
it's not start out. Okay,
but you got to start out with making the right passes, making the right decisions. This is week 1 of Daniel Jones. Clearly, the playbook has not been opened up completely yet. But if you said if this was the only sample size, you had to say thumb up or thumbs down on Daniel Jones, I think it's a thumbs up moving forward, saying that if you could just go on this game alone. What he did, what they asked him to do, he completed the passes. He moved the ball downfield vertically. He had one bad play, which chalk it up. Every quarterback can have at least one bad play. And the blindside fumble was clearly not his fault. So for me, I think when you go into the advanced numbers,
yeah, I would never put that on him.
Right. So some of it leans towards what they asked him to do in terms of throwing the ball 21 times. He did it really well, and he pushed the ball down the field. And Adam, they game planned for Saquon Barkley to run the ball because the offensive line is still not able to protect the quarterback during passing downs and passing situations. They had to run the ball. So my whole thing is, let's all be excited. Daniel Jones was either a net neutral, net positive for this team last Sunday against the Titans.
He's a net neutral. He's a net neutral. It's a net neutral, man. Like, and that's again, like, I'm not even trying to I'm excited to see him against Carolina. I think he is going to get better. Like, that's the point that I'm making here. I'm not saying that I don't think Daniel Jones isn't going to progress throughout this season and can be at the point where we say, hey, we can continue to keep this around and we can continue to build off of him. My point is, the Giants won in week 1, and nothing new was learned about Daniel Jones because you said, oh, look at the passing yards per completion. He threw 21 passes. That matters. Take away one play. And I know the results are the results, but if you sit there and say on 16 of 20, he throws 4, what would have been, 120 yards, right? And
But
again,
we don't do that for any other quarter. We don't do that for any other
no. We do
quarterback
it for
on that
every other
list. We
quarterback.
haven't.
We do it for every other quarterback.
All
My
right.
point
So
is,
if we
I
take
can
away,
the
the
biggest play.
5 touchdowns that Patrick Mahomes had, if we
No,
take away the
stop
5
it. Because
touchdowns
that
that Patrick Mahomes
because
had,
you're throwing
then
too
all of a
wide
sudden
of
he
a one.
didn't throw for any
Ready? No,
touchdowns.
listen to me. Listen. Take away the longest passing completion for every player on Sunday. Patrick Mahomes, his long was 35 yards, and he still threw for 360 with a 9.2 yard per average. And I'm not trying to compare Daniel Jones to Patrick Mahomes. Let's not put him fully on that level. 28 yards was the long for Matt Ryan in a losing effort. Let's try to find some of the guys here that won these games. Josh Allen threw a long of 53. Take it out of the bag there. He still threw for 245 yards on a 9.6 average. Going to drop a little bit if you take that one out. That's the point that I'm making. Justin Herbert, long of 42. Kirk Cousins had that long of 64 yards, and he still threw for then 277. The point here is, and I'm fully on board with what we've seen against a Tennessee Titans defense that is a strong opponent. I'm just trying to say, man, do not get out over your skis on this and take something that was a good starting point and inflate it to be something more than what it was. In 21 pass attempts, they reined Daniel Jones in, and he still, as a reined-in quarterback, stared down a receiver, threw it directly to the defense in the red zone. That's a huge factor in this for me too. And then we can talk about some other elements here. I want to get into the Kadarius Tony piece. If he hadn't done that, if he had lobbed that thing out of the end zone, I'd be talking differently about it. Because you said it was a net neutral, net positive, or negative. I'm leaving it neutral because I want to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's not going to do that again in week 2 or week 3, right? That was a one-off instance where he really wanted that to work out and he made that choice. But when you talk about him making the right plays and the smart plays, yes, he did. But a big part of that was saying, get the ball out of his hands early, get it into the playmakers, and let them do some work, right? Including Saquon Barkley. He took one of those quick passes on the outside and took it for 25, 30 yards. And you don't take away stats based on, one big play to Sterling Shepard. Hey, it counts. It's on the record, right? And it was a well-thrown ball. So, I'm giving him full credit for it. I don't know, man. I know it makes me sound like I'm like this Debbie Downer and the sky is falling.
It does.
It's just, dude,
it does.
He didn't. I know it's fine, man, because he didn't. Nothing about week 1 tells me that Daniel Jones is closer to being a franchise quarterback than he was coming out of last season. Week 2 and week 3 can tell me that. And I know everyone's going to jump in. If he has a good game against Carolina, they're going to go, see, I told you last week, and that's what it was. You didn't see anything in week 1 that indicates that Daniel Jones is taking a big leap forward. And to your point, a big component of that and the evaluation process is expanding the playbook, giving him opportunities, and something we're going to talk about here, a lack of Kadarius Tony, which can make things more dynamic and more explosive. It's all a part of the discussion here. We were positive. We love what we saw. And I want to make sure that we're giving ourselves the opportunity to continue to evaluate him. Because I guarantee you for a fact, Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, and the Giants did not come out of week 1 going, you know what I'm thinking, guys? Extension, baby.
So, Adam, just so we know where you stand with the OGP listeners.
I don't care. I don't listen, Prince.
You're putting yourself out,
you, man. Thank you for getting out. I appreciate it. I love it. I appreciate it. I totally do. Guess what? No NFL quarterback gets to walk in every week, every year, and have a perfect offensive line. I understand it. And guess what? I can give you the sliding scale of where I evaluate Daniel Jones because of what he has or does not have in front of him. But we talked about it last year. How much time did he have from snap to release of the football? He had one of the higher, I think it was 2.5, 2.6 seconds to point of release, even behind a bad offensive line. And I'll take it a step further. We're evaluating Daniel Jones on the ability to be the franchise quarterback for the New York Football Giants. Guess what? Franchise quarterbacks elevate their play even when things are not perfect around them. I can't be in the 4th year of this process and say, and by the way, things weren't great on the offensive line yesterday, but we'll talk about what was good. And there were a lot of instances in that second half where Daniel Jones played better than he did in the first. There was more opportunities based around the quality of the play on that line, though primarily rushing based as opposed to pass protection. Something we talked about too, about where those limitations were going to be.
So I think that's a good place to transition away from Daniel Jones. Obviously, we have a lot more to discuss over the course of the season.
Hold on. Full credit here, because this is
well played.
I love callbacks.
Well played.
I love callbacks, and all you can do is take it on the chin, man. Listen, if Aaron Donaldson ever comes over to the Giants, we're gonna have a real opportunity to win.
Hey, you know what? We would trade. Would we trade Darius Slayton for Aaron Donaldson? That's a real question.
We'll get into that one later in the week.
We got to crunch the numbers on that one. But
yeah.
To your point on the offensive line, and listen, we'll move away from the Daniel Jones stuff because I do want to I want to get positive with it. We knew going into this season. You heard that Evan Neal was more mature as a run blocker.
Yep.
You heard Glowinski is a very capable run blocker. Obviously, Andrew Thomas is starting to flourish as a left tackle. Adam, we talked about this in the preseason. I said, where is he ranked in the Madden rankings? He was ranked as the 21st offensive tackle in all of Madden. And I said, he's too low. It's insane. Like, he's going to be good. And everyone just kind of doubted him and hated him. He is a top 5 left tackle. You have all these like anonymous scouts now sending flowers saying, oh, if I could have had this, if I could have any under the radar, 3-year or under guy, give me Andrew Thomas. He's doing great. And he looked the part again against the Titans, who had a very formidable pass rush. And listen, this offensive line is a work in progress. But what I think was really smart about what Daboll and Kafka did was they said, we still don't have the pass protection figured out. We don't have consistency. So what we're going to do
very well
that
constructed
football.
Yeah,
and they said we're going to give the ball to Saquon Barkley. We're going to make sure that he gets the ball as much as humanly possible, and it was successful. That was a huge one. I did not see that coming at him. I thought that they were going to have to get Saquon out in space more. They gave him 15, 16 touches, inside the line, and said, "You're not the same run block, against the run defense, Tennessee. You have to come out after us and win in the trenches," and they couldn't do it.
Well, let's also and let's contextualize that too, because it was really good. And I'm not, this is all positive, but when we think about that win there and you go inside the stat sheet, remember I said that game-winning drive, and we're going to talk about this more from the all-22 perspective here on tomorrow's show. But when you go in and look inside the box score from this one, and you look at Saquon Barkley, as you said, 18. So, and this is where again, I think context matters too. 18 carries for $164. The guy was electric. And we're seeing, as we mentioned here in the comments, hey, it was a good, we say DJ and Saquon played well. Good game for DJ. Build off of it. I'm sorry. We're talking about two very different things. And we talk about Saquon Barkley was otherworldly in a game like this. 18 carries. 9 of them came on the final drive, the game-winning drive. 50% of his carries came in one single drive. That contextualizes this too. Like the Giants, man, they had to fight and scrape to get through this one, right? I mean, like it took 164 yards, 194 all-purpose yards from Saquon Barkley to get you there. And against a tough team like Tennessee, I don't care. I'll take it any which way that I can get it. And if I'm talking about building off of this, then what I want to see is from Saquon Barkley. I mean, listen, just more of the same, baby. Don't worry. Because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then from Daniel Jones and from the offense overall, offensive line play, hey, if I graded out the run blocking as an 85 in this game and the pass blocking as a 35, hey, man, give me 50-55 on the pass side, right? Show me a little improvement there. And then again, if you're Daniel Jones, show me, hey, man, take away one really egregious mistake, take away a couple of other bad decisions, etc. And we can, and that's the stepping stone. That's the building block. And I'm excited for that, man. I'm still elated coming off of a week 1 win. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, Adam, I have a question because this is an interesting conundrum because in the offseason, you and I talked about it. I still had the loyalty, blind faith as a Giant fan to say Saquon Barkley has a future with this team. There's no reason to trade him in the offseason and save that $7 million because his value's never been as low as it could possibly be in the offseason coming off of multiple injuries. If week one is any indication of how they want to use him and where his explosiveness and strength and conditioning and athleticism is right now, Saquon Barkley is going to be a problem. Like the Titans are a good defense. Carolina's a solid defense. Cowboys defense is meh, and the Bears defense is whatever. There are going to be games where you're going to give Saquon 20 touches and he could be approaching 200 yards all purpose for the Giants. Where do you stand? Where do you stand? Where do you stand on Saquon Barkley as you think about him moving forward?
I'll answer in a second, but how would you take we're going to ballpark it 3,300 all-purpose yards. Do you like that on the season? Would you take that from Saquon? That's what it is. It's 194.
Yes.
Would you take that?
That sounds pretty good. So yeah, so would you sign up for that?
By the way, off of week 1, Saquon Barkley would go for 300 more yards on the season than Daniel Jones, right? 3,000 for Daniel Jones, 33. Always a good footnote. It's not always going to look that perfect for Saquon. To your point, listen, I'll be brief with this because that's a big picture question. It's franchise tag. I think that's where you would start next year with Saquon Barkley, and then you would make those decisions from there going forward. Because again, you're still going to evaluate Daniel Jones. You're going to evaluate a lot of other pieces. And I think it's fine, man. Saquon may not love, you have to come to the table with it. And if you can find a reasonable number, etc. I think if he looks like rookie form, there's always this risk reward, right? Christian McCaffrey gets the big payday, immediately has the injury. And that's a difficult thing. The Giants are obviously going to have cap room to work with. And do I think that Saquon, and we talked about this a little bit where I said, I'll at least evolve myself, and week one certainly started moving me more in that direction. Can Saquon be a part of this team beyond it? If I'm looking at both these players, I think Saquon with a rookie quarterback, that's your best friend potentially, right? As opposed to maybe Daniel Jones going forward. So we'll cross that bridge, man. But no, for sure. And like I said, it's always man, you can paint this however you want. I'm always willing to have my mind be changed on things, right? I'm not here to say that Daniel Jones is the worst quarterback in the history of the NFL or that he's the greatest. I can only take what I see in front of me. I watch the week one, I go, gosh darn it, if Saquon's going to be healthy all year and capable of taking 18 carries and turning it into anything close to that, we have a real opportunity to have some success here.
Couple news and notes. Yeah, news and notes, Adam. We've got some feedback on the Wan'Dale Robinson injury. It's not expected to be as serious as it was. Another good sign, good news for the Giants that he could get back out there after playing a handful of snaps. But I think what we can close out on is just that quick Kadarius Tony conversation. Obviously, there's a lot to go through here. Brian Daboll and the coaching staff is not really giving us a lot to go on. But clearly there is something at play here if Kadarius Tony only gets 7 snaps in the game. And when he was out there and he has the ball in his hands, he looks elusive and shifty and dynamic with the ball. So, they kind of allude that he's got to be doing the right things. What that means, I'm not necessarily sure. Was he on a pitch count because he was injured? There's a lot of questions to be asked here, but was it alarming to you that he only got 7 carries, or are you just saying, similar to everything else, it's week one, maybe it wasn't part of the program, maybe week 2 he gets featured?
Yeah, I tend to go on the latter than the former of, listen, if I'm, again, taking a big picture here, right? It's week one. I'm not gonna react to it in that way. Now, I will say coming into week one, I was like, here we go, baby. Get the ball into this kid's hands. We didn't get to see a lot of him last year. He's dynamic, and it seemed like he got onto a good foot with the organization. I'm gonna put it in this category. He had injuries. We know that he had offseason procedures. So I think the Giants are going to be responsible in working him in. I also think, as we've talked about the theme of it since Daboll and Kafka and Wink Martindale came in, right? The guys that perform well are going to get those opportunities. And we saw Richie James, right? Okay, here's an experienced wide receiver, has been around the league, familiarity with working into a system. He was deserving of getting reps in that game. Sterling Shepard, right? This is a veteran, experienced wide receiver when you need those plays to happen. I'm not saying that, man, I can point to any number of those plays and say if it was Kadarius Tony, it could have been X, right? Insert him on any of these opportunities and maybe they go to the house and things look more explosive. And maybe Daniel Jones' stat line looks that much better in a game like this. But I'm going to hold off on it. I think playbook could matter here. Coming out of college, Kadarius Tony is an electric talent, but you don't think about him as being a tactician of route combinations. He's an instinctual player, right? He's going to, he talked about it in the offseason and coming out of last year. I get out there, it's bob and weave. I go where I'm going to kind of be freelancing out there. And as long as he develops that connection with Daniel Jones, that can be phenomenal. But again, if you're the Giants and you want Daniel Jones to have the best possible opportunity to succeed, I think it's important to say the guys we put on the field go out there and do what is expected, and that helps him, Daniel Jones, and the offense have success. I was maybe even a little bit surprised once Wan'Dale went out that you didn't then maybe say, hey, listen, for better or worse, we got to find something here to be able to utilize it. And they did look to in the second half. I have one more follow-up, but are you on the same page there?
I am, because the fact that Wan'Dale Robinson went out and they didn't start featuring Kadarius Tony heavily, it makes me think it was either injury or otherwise that they were like kind of keeping him off to the side for a minute. Because it just feels that way, because if you actually needed to use him and it was just a little bit of like a penalty for not doing something right in practice, like they would have started featuring him once Wan'Dale Robinson goes out. So I think there's something more to that piece. But listen, Richie James looked great. the wide receiving core was a mixed bag to me. On when you talk about kind of neutral, it's like Sterling Shepard looked great, veteran leadership, explosiveness. Richie James felt like he was all over the field, earning his way on there. And then you had guys like Wanda Robinson, who had an incomplete because he was injured. And you have Kadarius Tony only getting 7 snaps, and Kenny Golladay, who knows what you really saw. I mean, he had what, 1 or 2 grabs? It feels like week 1 was kind of like a meh in the overall wide receiving room, and week 2 we'll have an opportunity to actually see what's happening.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that more throughout this week here. But that it's like for Daniel Jones as well. Like everyone other than Richie James for what he accomplished, Tay Crowder for absolutely just blowing up Derrick Henry. And there's going to be other guys here when we look at the all-22, right? And what a lot of players that did things well. We have a couple names already on that list. But for the most part, it's a week 1 incomplete. Outside of the team's success, winning the game, that's what mattered most, obviously, in this one. And even credit to Dan Orlovsky on ESPN, who pointed out, when you have a Saquon Barkley, the difference on that 2-point conversion play, it wasn't that the play was not flawless. When he gets that little flip from Daniel Jones, there's 3 defenders coming through the line against him, right? It's the talent that Saquon Barkley is, where he goes, okay, what I can do here for you is dodge 3 and then surge through another 2 or 3 to make this happen. And that's the special playmaking that you need to have on the roster in order to be successful. We're going to come back in here. I did the Lord's work on this episode. Andy's under the weather. So that's really why I only let him speak for about 4 minutes out of the 36-minute podcast. Marty mentioned this here real quick. Danny Dimes, not great, not bad either. And that's where I am, in spite of the way you may perceive this episode. We'll see where it goes from here. Coming up, we'll take a look at the film. Going to talk about that final drive, what worked well, talk about some offensive linemen, expectations there. And then also, later in the week, when we have this Carolina game coming up here, I'm going to be let's be cautiously optimistic, because Dak Prescott goes down and already Giants fans are licking their lips about week number 3. Week number 2, right? Don't get out over your skis on this one. Let's go be successful in week number 2. And over the rest of the week, we're going to talk about how the Giants can do that. Same thing as last time. Offense versus defense, defense versus offense. Where can this team have success and find a way in the NFC East? Find a way to build off a week 1 win and maybe be shockingly 2-0. And that changes the tide of how you start to look at this season. You get us on YouTube, friends. You get us over on the podcast feed, wherever you get those needs fulfilled. We shout out everybody, man. Did not hit as many of the conversations and talking points inside the chat. We'll do more of it. I got to be honest with you, Andy. You can love or hate with the direction I'm going with some of this stuff. I feel like my energy level since this season kicked off is borderline aggressive. This is borderline. You could probably drain my veins and give it to other people as caffeine. Feel free to do whatever you can to support the podcast, as Andy Makowitz would want, need, and nay, more than ever, because he wanted to talk, but I wouldn't let him. Demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.
Woo! Andy will talk next time.